Hey everyone, this is Jeff King. Welcome to the Red and Blue Cybersecurity Show. This is our third one in 2023. Our format is basically a hit hard with some very important cybersecurity tips. Maybe about 30, 40 minutes, talk about the way that you can use our guest advice in your own operation for your security strategies. Today's topic is maximizing compliance and minimizing risk with innovative cybersecurity testing. We're going to try to go through both the executive side and the IT side and the technical report side and talk about the innovations that are happening there. Today's podcast guests are Paul Feathers, founders of Compunetics Technology Risk Advisory Service. Paul has worked with such a company as BDO and Crow Horeth on IT compliance strategies to meet regulatory requirements. Hey, Paul.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
You bet. And Tom Fox. He's our Hollywood guy here, the voice of compliance, the founder of the Compliance Podcast Network. Tom's been through so many podcasts that I know he's going to be bringing a lot of great insights into us. Tom, I don't know. You're usually on the red carpet, I'm sure, with the way that you've got the podcast figured out here. But appreciate you joining us today. It's fantastic to have your overall perspective on the compliance industry.
Thanks, Jeff. Happy to be here and looking forward to a pretty healthy discussion today.
That's right. Oh, we got a lot to cover, so we'll do that. But, so maximizing compliance, minimizing risk, basically you probably should be adding a few more things in there that have happened in the industry. You got probably cost effectiveness, audits usefulness to the company versus just a piece of paper that hangs out over there in the middle of some desk as well. So, let's talk a little bit about the challenges that are happening now. I mean, Tom, I'll ask you for the overall perspective since you are the compliance guy. What are some of the challenges you see in being able to do these risk assessments out there?
So what's been interesting to me is a couple of different things, Jeff. One is regulatory/legal, but the other is business. Let me start with business because at the end of the day, we're all here to make money, and that makes business the most important. And it's the following. If you don't have an adequate cybersecurity risk management program, you can't do business. And I don't mean that your company is at risk. I mean that people won't do business with you. This is table stakes now. This is not a nice to have. This is not a business differentiator. This is if you want to do business with a multinational company as a subcontractor, as a joint venture partner, as a vendor, you're going to have to demonstrate not only do you have a cybersecurity program, but you have a continuous monitoring program because companies won't do business with you if you don't have that in place. Literally so I come out of the energy industry, so I'll stick with that a little bit. If you want to do business with Exxon, a Shell, a Chevron, or any of the operating companies, you're going to have a cybersecurity program. There are 4 oilfield service companies that generally do the work for those developer operating companies. You want to do business with them, whether you're a multinational, multi-million or even billion-dollar company, or if you're a $15 million software company with one piece of software that does something, you're going to have a cybersecurity program because literally they cannot afford to do business with someone who may be hacked and invaded and any type of malware put on their software, which would penetrate the people that they're doing business with. So I really want to emphasize from the business perspective, that is driving cybersecurity as much as the regulators. Obviously, the regulators have a role, and their role in the United States has been to require transparency if you have a breach and to help work with industry leaders to set standards for appropriate cybersecurity, moving once again towards continuous monitoring. So both the regulators and the businesses require having a robust a cybersecurity risk management program, and that is driving business as much as any other reason. But it doesn't just stop with doing business. If you want funding, if you want private equity investment, if you want a bank loan, if you want insurance, all of those entities are going to not simply ask about your cybersecurity risk management program, they may well come in and test it. And I know Paul really is much more the technical expert and can talk about the types of testing that you need to do and the type of program you have to have in place. But I will say, if you haven't documented what you've done, literally in someone else's eyes, you haven't done anything. So you have to have documentation available to show a bank, a private equity investor, perhaps an institutional investor who wants to take out stock in your company. It may be an individual investor like the three of us, could be a insurance company, or it could be a wide variety of other entities which will require you to demonstrate your risk management program and the robustness of it going forward. So once again, this is not just a nice to have, this is a mandatory to have, and companies need to understand that there are a variety of audiences for your cybersecurity risk management program, including your reports and documentation. That can be business leaders, it can be banks, it could be regulators. And so whatever you have in place has to be robust and transparent. And you, as a cybersecurity risk management expert in your company, are going to have to be able to sit down and explain that to them, and maybe explain to a lawyer like me, who is not a cybersecurity risk management expert. So documentation, the ability to demonstrate that to a wide variety of audiences is absolutely critical.
Wow. So, Paul, he brings up the point of the IT side. And basically, when you started, you've got a very illustrious background on being involved with compliance audits throughout your history here. But it used to be a box, and it used to be kind of easy to protect, and you could show people there, and no one can touch it. Now IT's changed to hybrid cloud structures. We've got APIs, we've got external applications, we've got microservices. So your actual job has certainly risen in complexities over time.
Yes, sir, Jeff. I tend to agree with you that the complexity has increased exponentially over time. In all of my assessments that I've performed in the years past, it did actually fit towards that box mentality. They had a lot of on-prem servers and services. They didn't have a lot of connectivity out to other third parties. Third parties were excluded specifically because of that. And there weren't a lot of connections into our internal data centers. Now that's totally changed with the cloud infrastructure that we have, multi-cloud, and like you said, hybrid cloud. Those IT folks have changed completely. They are no longer, border protections around our internal infrastructure. Now they have to have multiple teams protecting those environments in different cloud environments, and they have to all work together. So I think that regulatory requirement, yes, it is regulatory, but as Tom mentioned, there is some cybersecurity insurance underwriters that will not write policies for companies that do not have a robust cybersecurity program. And those programs, they have to be detailed. They have to cover all the assets of your enterprise. And you have to be able to prove it, as Tom said, to not only the regulators, but your underwriters, investors, private equity groups. It really is substantial what's required. And then from the IT perspective, that activity is getting worse and more diverse and hard to keep up with all of the what we call remediation or findings. that are found within that program to fix everything from physical security to IT related services, microservices, cloud infrastructure. All of those findings have to be managed and maintained so you can stay secure. Because really, the weakest link, as we've seen in some of the recent breaches, are the vulnerability management and the lack of remediation for some of those vulnerabilities. And there's new vulnerabilities every day, thousands and thousands of them every day. So to stay on top of that, you have to have a continuous compliance program, as well as the ability to track and monitor the remediation that's getting performed over time.
So that speaks to the concept, the evolution of penetration testing is the essence of some of this compliance work that you both have been talking about. And, it's over time, it's been a checkbox kind of, okay, we did it. Now people are going, what am I doing this? What's the impact? Why can't I use it? Why can't it be more valuable for my company? Tom, can you give us a little perspective? You've been in the industry for a while. Penetration testing is evolved quite a bit.
Sure. So perhaps the most prescient comment I heard about COVID-19 applies in this situation. We move from disaster recovery to business resiliency to business as usual. It doesn't matter what the event is, whether you want to talk about a geopolitical event or whether you want to talk about a penetration. You're expected to be doing business literally that afternoon or the next day.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to have the ability to detect, you have to have the ability to prevent, and you have to have the ability to remediate literally on an ongoing basis. And that's simply from the business perspective. That's not from the legal or regulatory perspective. So having this continuous process is something that your customers are going to expect. And if I can expand it a little bit to stakeholders, the Business Roundtable, in their statement on the purpose of corporation, identified at least 5 stakeholders for every corporation. Certainly shareholders, but customers, but your vendors, but your employees, and those you do where you do local business. So there's a wide variety of stakeholders for every corporation, and this type of approach of a continuous process is going to be mandatory for you to be able to do business going forward. And so, as I started sort of my remarks with, this is really a business requirement. And if you can't show that from the business perspective, it's not that people don't want to do business with you. They can't do business with you because they can't afford the risk, and they can't manage that risk if you don't manage that risk. And so I usually try to end any talk I give with the following, but I'm just going to say it now. What are the 3 most important things in any compliance program? It doesn't matter what it is. Well, Paul named it. Document, document, document.
Wow.
And have that documentation available for yourself, for every stakeholder, for a regulator, for another business, or if you have to show the general public, yes, we were breached, but here are the steps we've taken. So the documentation is absolutely critical.
Paul, you've mentioned a little bit about penetration testing, the importance of it, but you talk about some of your clients saying, wow, this is so expensive. Tell us a little bit about how penetration testing has gone through the years for you.
Yeah, I think that they seem to think that this is a one-time activity because of the expense, and they lose sight of the requirements to have a secure environment over time. And so your budgetary numbers always hit as a line item on a IT budget for just pen testing. And that line item is very misleading. It is a large number, let's say, but it doesn't actually provide you any risk mitigation over time. It's more of a point in time. And when you do the actual test in the past, it would be very point in time, meaning that it happened during this week or this 2-week period. But that does not pay attention to the vulnerabilities that are found after the fact.
Mhm.
And I think that when you have a program in place to test continuously and understand that new vulnerabilities happen all the time, and that you can prove to not only your stakeholders internally, your board members, your CIO, CISO, those guys, they need to know what is actually the priority to get those things fixed quickly, and then to also make sure going forward that it's actually fixed. Just recently, we saw one of those where one was a breach occurred. They said, "Oh yeah, we fixed it right away," but actually they didn't. They didn't apply the proper patch. Patching is lost art for sure, and it has to be done properly, and then you have to retest. So in a old style penetration test, you would have to come back and run the test again after things were remediated, and it becomes expensive for sure.
You talk about old style. Can we're the real world case studies and ideas of what cybersecurity has gone through. Can you kind of give everyone in the audience a little bit of perspective, internal, external? Tell us what a pen testing operation is from your technical standpoint.
Yeah, it's a multi-stage process for sure. And yes, there is external, internal, application pen testing. There's specific server type pen testing that we've done. There's user access related testing that we call it bad user testing. And we also have what we call white box and black box testing. Those different types of tests designate whether the pen tester has specific access rights to the infrastructure. So on an external pen test, black box, you don't have any idea anything about the company. You have to do everything from the outside as if we were a hacker. So you have to do all the footprinting, all of the scanning, all of the information of what is readily available to the hacker from the outside to try to get inside the company through those exposed ports.
Okay.
And then in white box testing, you might have a little bit more access rights. You might be a same kind of an account that a vendor might have, or a third party that's connecting to you. So they do have some access rights, and you can use that to see how far or how bad a bad vendor could be from a compromised vendor network into my network. So there's multiple levels of that activity. Same thing applies on the internal side. You have no access, which would be a black box. You have some kind of gray sometimes where you have some limited access. And then you have Joe user type access where, some Joe user account with limited access, and how could that person could be compromised or go rogue and do nefarious things to your internal network. So all of that different phases, they cost money, but they are also things that are required because usually it's either a misconfiguration, a lack of a patch, or a bad user. Okay. No matter whether they're on the external side or the internal side. That's usually where the breach occurs, or the loss of data, or getting taken offline, some of those things.
Got it. Hey, by the way, I appreciate everyone in the audience joining us today. And if you have any comments or questions, there's a comment section in our podcast that allows you to grab a few new insights from Tom and Paul. Just write them up there, and I'll ask them toward the end of our podcast. So, hey, Tom, so the real world case studies is out there. I'm sure you've had other podcasts. You've talked about other lawyers. What are some of the innovative cybersecurity testing things that you're hearing about out there?
So that's a really interesting question, because I don't want to say it's back to the future, but I would almost say it's reprioritizing what you are doing and re-emphasizing that. And let me pick up on one of Paul's points on one of the three key areas for either system failure or actual penetration, and that's users. Well, what does that mean? That means training. And that means literally continuous training. And my wife used to work in a major oilfield service company. And during the pandemic, of course, we were both working from home. And she comes to me one day and says, I got this email. What do you think? And I said, I think you need to notify your corporate IT department immediately. Well, and it turned out it was a test. But that type of training, and they, of course, wanted it reported. And so she went and reported it. And, she got a gold star for it. But the point was that continuous training is absolutely mandatory in this space. And you have to talk about these things. You have to remind employees if it feels wrong, if it smells wrong, if it looks wrong, if it's just unusual, if it's outside whatever your norms are, raise your hand. Call IT, email IT. Don't click on something that, even though it may look right, is not right. And that goes back to users, and that goes back to training. What's more basic than training? Not much. Yeah. So in terms of innovation, I always ask people to think about what are the basics of your program and reprioritize them. When was the last time you sent out one of those emails? Seeing who responded. If they didn't respond, maybe you could give them a little 5 or 10 minute video refresher with someone like Paul giving one example of one user who clicked through a link and the bad things happen. Those are all in the public record. So this is not a massive, we have to revamp our entire program. This is focused risk management by testing. It is focused risk management by training, and it's documented. So if a regulator comes along and said, what did you do to test your biggest vulnerability, i.e. users? Here's what we did. We saw if our users understood the training they received, and then for those who didn't understand the training well enough to at least respond, we gave them additional training, and maybe we followed up with a test. So what I've outlined hopefully is not a hugely expensive, hugely intrusive program, but it's reprioritizing some of the basics of a program. And I know Paul can speak to the technical side of these things, but I want people to understand that the basics of a compliance program are the basics, that they're there for a reason. They haven't changed. They are compliance literally across all phases of a corporate existence. And you can utilize those things to help manage your risks by focusing on your risks. If your risks are your employees or your users, well, manage that risk. And so reprioritize what you're doing. And so that allows you to do it in a little more cost-effective manner, but also with an audit trail for not only the auditors, but those other audiences that we've talked about, regulators, shareholders, boards of directors, or others.
Hey, come on now. We got to get after some of the sexy stuff now. You're talking about all the things that are practical. Paul and I, we want to get into some of the things that are like AI, learning, and some of the things that really are allowing us to accomplish some of the things you're talking about, Tom.
Blocking and tackling is the basis of every compliance program.
Well, you
have to have AI on your team. If you don't have AI or ML on your team, it's going to be real hard to do your general blocking and tackling, as you say. You're going to need help. And I've seen companies that fall down on just those few things like training. And then when they have a claim on a breach, they don't get paid. The claim doesn't go through because they didn't have some of those basic things in place. And it's very painful. So I think, to add to your team, which is, everybody's got a limited cyber team or IT related team, no matter what size company you are. So anything you can do to actually add to your team from an AI perspective or a machine learning perspective, tools and techniques, processes that can do things more efficiently and or risk rate the things that are found within this process called, pen testing or cybersecurity testing is beneficial, truly.
Well, you talked a little bit about continuous. You talked a little bit about the transformation of pen testing and using machine learning and AI in that case is the way that we've approached it from Prancer's standpoint. Some of the pen testing challenges is just the discovery of these new hybrid cloud systems, APIs, applications can take weeks and weeks. So to actually implement and use the intelligence systems to gather better information before you do your pen testing, then actually going through the testing process, it takes over 1,000 different ways of testing and building strategies. Doing that as a manual person, another week or two as far as on top of things. Then doing the actual risk assessment usually gets short-changed. You usually don't do a very good job at putting high, low, medium risk out there, especially with all the false positives that do come out of the old way of doing things. Using machine learning to actually correlate and being able to assess what the actual or the vulnerability, how threatening it is to your organization is important. And then the remediation. Some of the things that we've been able to do with Prancer is be able to use the new chat GPT and new AI systems to supplement the research that we've done in our Prancer system. Anyway, all that adds up to definitely leaning on machine learning to augment the current teams out there. It's Paul. Have you seen other type of ways that machine learning and AI are being used out there?
Well, I think that is a dream for all of us, right? And I think it's moving in that direction. There's been a lot of information in the news recently about that dream, getting the use of AI and ML into a specific process area so you can start to benefit from it efficiently as well as securely. So there's been discussions here lately about, does that AI really know about this kind of activity? So it does have to be trained and it has to learn. And I think as you move AI into specific processes, not only in cyber, we were talking about application security and user security. AI is also in that space as well. And so it's not only, as you said, risk assessments and risk rating, it's used in that location as well. So to help you understand what those risks are, maybe by the type of application or the connectivity between other applications or other environments as to what raises that risk rating higher or lower on the particular vulnerability. So yes, it is something that a lot of companies want that in their process. One, because it can be more efficient, but it gives them better information quicker.
So, Tom, are you going to be replaced pretty soon by a robot for your compliance podcast?
So I just love this question because I think it was in the 1830s in England where the Luddites revolted against machines.
Oh,
and coming forward to 2023, the answer is absolutely not, because it's going to make people like us even more valuable and frankly more important. And every machine learning that we engage in gives us, the humans, the ability to look at a wider data set quickly, more efficiently, but you have to have that human oversight. And that really leads to something that you may not think is attached to cybersecurity, but it's clear to me from your question, Jeff. Almost every corporate HR person I talk to says the differentiator in 10 years in corporations will be talent acquisition and talent retention for exactly what you just asked me. will I be replaced? If I can't use those tools, I may well be replaced, and I probably should be replaced. But by having the ability to utilize the information that machine learning can give you and AI can give you, as Paul has said, it is going to be absolutely critical. And I know people might not understand or might not have thought through why cybersecurity can lead to corporations having better talent, but people want to work at those corporations and they're going to value that talent, and that talent is going to be rewarded. So no, I'm not going to be replaced, because I see all of those tools as essentially the same thing I saw when I was in, I think, seventh grade, when my parents bought our first Encyclopedia Britannica.
Ha.
I had more information at my fingertips literally in one day when that arrived than I ever had. And when Paul talks about, yes, you are at X now, but with machine learning, you'll be X plus Y plus Z in 3 years. That's where I see all of this going. So it relates directly into your employee base. It relates directly to employees who want to work for you and with you. And it relates to an overall cybersecurity discussion that literally needs to be held at the highest level of your company. And I mean the board of directors.
Well, the whole idea of continuous is certainly is very. I mean, it's dominating all of our conversations that we've had out there with our clients. Being able to do this kind of extensive work of being able to assess your vulnerabilities requires some of it to be offloaded into these new technologies. The heavy lifting, especially, so that their team can actually focus at being the creative elements and be able to jump on top of what is actually being done with some of the threat strategies that we've done. They're maybe looking at the risk assessments and adding their point of view, and then certainly adding, Tom, to your perspective, the executive reports. They can focus at the insights of those executive reports at the audits, doing all this heavy lifting of determining whether their vulnerabilities were patched or not. So, especially Paul, from your standpoint, that end result, I'm sure, of that technical report, it gets to be very complicated.
Yeah, we've had those requests of us for 2 different reports. One, an executive level report, 2 or 3 pages, and it doesn't have a lot of meat on it. It's just, it tells you, some highs and some mediums and where you stand. But the detailed report, the underlying vulnerabilities, the actual areas of risk and concern, it can be thousands of pages long. And so I think there is a need to not just have a line item listing of the areas of risk, but detailed information about the finding, what it means, what's the risk, how does it play into the connectivity between the systems, the API connectivity or outside connectivity into that system, and how you're actually preventing some of that connectivity for security reasons. And I think the IT guys that I interact with, the guys that are on the front line trying to remediate these problems, that can be overwhelming. And they want more details so they can quickly respond to the findings and to how to remediate things quicker. They all seem to just lose their mind when they get this thousands and thousands of pages. And some of them can be fixed. We've seen this before, where you fix one thing and 600 items get fixed. Well, that's just because, patching is such that patches will include multi fixes in one patch. And so when you have a hard to fathom, that there's so many things that can be wrong with a specific device or a specific application or a server, and even from the external perspective, there's a lot of things that need to be looked at, and to have a good way to report quickly and to provide solid information to our IT remediation team or the network team or the external team or the web team or whoever it might be for those specific pieces of infrastructure.
Tom, I think the concept that you would probably get more involved with is the contextualization of risk. You know, the one time a year type of report that never is done again by another company the following year and then the following year really doesn't help executives understand where the company is in context to. So, having a report, having a system that actually says, okay, this is where we tracks the actual. Here's the error or the vulnerabilities we've had. Here's the remediation effort that we've accomplished, and then here is the ongoing. Some of the other things we have to do is real important to executives.
Absolutely. But let me even take it above the executive level to the board of directors level, because there's a board role in cybersecurity and there's a board role in utilizing these reports. And Paul talked about the executive summary. A board has a separate legal obligation above executives, and that is oversight, not daily management, but oversight. But now boards are being asked to move from a specific subject matter risk approach. So if you're a food company, food safety; if you're an airline manufacturer, airline safety, to a truly risk management committee. And this requires that the board have, number one, cyber expertise. But number two, it allows or gives the CISO, the CTO, whoever might be in charge of that in your organization, the ability to talk to the board. But they have to be able to talk to the board in a manner the board's going to understand it and be able to exercise, once again, oversight, not management. Now, occasionally a board member may want to go into the weeds, and then, as Paul said, we can take you into the weeds. But they're going to want to know the bigger picture. Are you detecting? Are you preventing? Are you remediating? And they're going to want that more than once a year. And indeed, their legal obligation says they have to have that more than once a year. So from a good corporate governance perspective, this type of report and reporting to the board of directors is absolutely mandatory for an overall risk management approach at the board level. So when I've been trying to emphasize there are multiple audiences for these reports, and the board of directors is a key audience as well. And that's something that every CISO, CTO, or head of IT needs to be cognizant of and needs to be doing from a corporate governance perspective.
So it sounds like having one pane of glass and vision into your operations really important too. Not having a bunch of technology readings here, there, over there, and spending hours trying to being able to pull it all together for the board so that it actually shows meaning to them. So that takes a lot of time to do that kind of stuff too.
One source of truth.
Yeah. Paul, from your perspective, the future of cybersecurity testing is any ideas that you can pass on to our audience? Some of the things, 1, 2, 3, that they should probably be doing?
Something that we haven't heard yet, but this whole thing about risk management is that you cannot eliminate all risk. You're going to have risk all the time, no matter what. So this whole concept, we've got cybersecurity insurance for that. Well, that's not the right answer, right? So I think over time, there's going to be a need for a lot of companies that want cybersecurity insurance are not going to be able to obtain it. And that's scary, right? For a small company or even larger enterprise. They're not going to be able to.
I saw that on some article just today was how their insurance companies are backing off on it.
Yeah, these underwriters, I work with underwriters, and those guys, they're starting to really get hard on companies to provide them with the necessary information to actually get a policy considered. It's going to be expensive too, and it's going to have a lot of things line itemed out that they're not going to cover. So that's even harder on companies. So I think from a, newfangled things, where we're going is that this process, what we call, risk management process, it is a huge undertaking for a lot of companies, and they really want to get help in managing specific risks over time. And I think, the IT guys, they have a large burden on their team to provide that risk management process for their environment. But, they used to be seen as an expense. IT, it's just an expense. Well, now it's just the cost of doing business. You have to have this IT infrastructure, IT people, services, applications, all that stuff that's expensive, but you have to manage and maintain it properly over time. And I think, board members, they want to see improvement, within their enterprise, because they're spending a lot of money on not only the plethora of tools, which we're trying to eliminate in a lot of companies, trying to get fewer and fewer tools so that we can consolidate those risks into one, GRC program, something that's going to give us an overall view of the risk to the enterprise in all of those process areas. There's a lot of it.
When you talk about productivity, that's, why not actually fix the code and the vulnerabilities before they get uploaded into the cloud? Certainly what Prancer has worked on and has done, actually integrating with all the CI/CD processes out there, being able to get the developers and making them, put actually, or giving them the opportunity to put a higher quality code into the cloud before it actually gets implemented, or before the actual deployment goes on. So I think that's a very important part of any kind of risk assessments out there. Get it before it gets bad. Tom, anything from your perspective that you want to sign off on? How you see our future and all this compliance audits and the risk side?
Let me just re-emphasize what Paul just told us. You don't eliminate risk, you manage risk. And you manage that risk by assessing your risk, putting a risk management strategy in place, monitoring that strategy, and then continuous improvement. Insurance is not a risk management. It's a strategy, but it's a risk shifting strategy. It does not eliminate risk. You as a compliance professional, you as an IT professional, you as a board of directors have a variety of tools to manage risk. Some of the processes we've talked about here are some of those strategies, but use all of those strategies to manage those risks. You don't have compliance to slow you down. Compliance are not brakes on a car. The reason you have brakes on a car is so you can go fast. If you have an appropriate risk management strategy that's continuously monitored and continuously upgraded, your business can pivot, it can respond, it can do business as usual, which is now required. So risk management, a robust risk management strategy, is a part of an overall business strategy. And that's why I don't see it as a cost. I see it as an opportunity to do business more quickly, more efficiently, and at the end of the day, more profitably.
You mean the security guys are not the ones that are always saying stop, 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 and block everything like that Paul used to do in his heyday?
No, because Paul has machine learning and AI now, which allows him to move forward in a much more quicker and efficient manner, because the risks identified are coming to him much more quickly, and he can react more quickly.
All right. Is that right, Paul?
Yeah, I was going to say that that old lingo of FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, that used to be around in our IT world, really is not there any longer, because we have to be certain of all of this activity that's going on, because we need to stay in business.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of companies that go through a breach, they don't realize that this is a company ending event. And they, we have insurance. Sorry, that doesn't cut it. It could actually be a company ending event. And I don't mean to be gloom and doom on cyber, but it's a reality. There used to be discussions about low hanging fruit. They're not going to look at us. Forget it. We're a small company. Blah blah blah. No, they're going out of business when they have a breach, or when they have some vendor that actually says, "Hey, where are you? We were trying to pay your bill, and now you're offline. What's going on?" That could be done over. So it's very important to actually stay vigilant on this whole process, because it is something that's required. And we used to say, you want to keep your executives out of the orange jumpsuit for a reason. There is some of those penalties as well. So stay vigilant, and it's definitely a requirement nowadays.
So lots of compliance audits, need a lot more vigilance, continuous vigilance on things. You need the specific actions and remediations that are required there. Get them done so that there are no penalties. The audit penalty trail is a painful one, and being able to give everyone a technology or a security mindset is what Tom is also talking about. Very good, important things. Innovations plus the blocking and tackling that we've all outlined here, which may be an innovation. Blocking and tackling might even be innovations for people. So, hey, thanks a lot. Hey, Tom, if someone wants to reach you, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you and learn more scary things?
So you can reach me through LinkedIn, Thomas Fox. You can email me at tfox@tfoxlaw.com. You can also go to my network, the Compliance Podcast Network, which is found at www.compliancepodcastnetwork.net. And you can leave me a voicemail or send me an email through that mechanism as well.
Well, I know I've benefited from doing outreach to you, so I encourage everyone else to do that. Paul, your operation, you're right here in Texas.
Yes, sir.
What's the best way to people reaching you?
LinkedIn is the preferred method. I think there's a lot of activity on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to have those conversations. We do have what we call discovery calls all the time with all sizes of companies, trying to help them just get a grip on what to do next and how to go down that path, not only with cyber, but technology risk in general. So feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Name of my company is Compunetics, and you can see me online. Thank you.
Great. Hey, and hopefully Prancer is one of those solutions as we talk more and more between ourselves. The Prancer is one of the only operations or technology platforms that is doing the advanced thinking, advanced threat emulation, advanced risk remediation efforts, using AI, using machine learning, being able to compile that into a easy to understand reporting system and dashboards. We are the ones that are integrated throughout all the CI/CD process, have integration with Jira and all the other communication systems so that your team is more productive. Happy to answer more questions for people in the future on that. Jeff King at LinkedIn too would be great. With that, I'll sign off. I thank you guys for giving us a very intriguing discussion about compliance. It's not simple, so appreciate you guys. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us.
Okay.